Hello, and welcome to Horns of a Dilemma, podcast of the Texas National Security Review, TNSR. I'm Doyle Hodges, Executive Editor of TNSR. In politics, the power to name is incredibly important. International relations realists, for example, benefit from having gotten first to a name that implies that they alone have a hard-nosed assessment of the world as it really is. I often wonder whether constructivism might enjoy more support if its name didn't seem to vaguely imply some sort of fuzzy-headed notion that everything is contingent on everything else, even though many of its adherents have a remarkably clear-eyed view of national security and its needs. Yet the concept of soft power was named by its creator, Joseph Nye, so you might think that we have little to complain about. Yet, the use of the word soft causes many realists to seem to consider soft power as a luxury good, something to be pursued if we have everything else already taken care of, but not a major way of securing U.S. power and prestige on its own. In this week's Horns of a Dilemma, Daniel Runde, Senior Vice President, William A. Schreier Chair, Director Project on Prosperity and Development at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, talks about his new book, The American Imperative, Reclaiming Global Leadership Through Soft Power. Runde makes the argument that soft power is underlined by hard politics. Indeed, he says, great power competition is unlikely to play out in Russia or in China. And, to be honest, we should hope that it doesn't. Instead, he says, great power competition will play out in the developing world. It will play out in rural parts of the United States. It will play out in places where people will base their decisions based on soft power. And so the importance of attaining soft power leadership could not be greater in order to prevent a world in which the Chinese Communist Party is exercising its control to set standards and gain access to the fruits of the world's labor. Runde makes his argument powerfully and concisely, and also concludes with a discussion about Ukraine. This is a fascinating discussion that was held at the Clements Center at the University of Texas, Austin. Let's listen in.
Before I start with who am I and why did I do this, can I just ask a question? Do you guys have heard the term great power competition? Who's heard that term? Everybody hands? Okay. Who believes we're in a period of great power competition? Everybody? Most people? Más o menos? Okay. So I'm going to guess most of you are going to buy that argument. Okay. So let me start with this, and then I'm going to kind of pivot to who am I and the kind of what the punchline is. But here's the punchline of this, and what I want to leave you with is great power competition is not going to happen in Russia, and it's not going to happen in China. It's going to happen in Africa. It's going to happen in Southeast Asia. It's going to happen in Latin America. It's going to happen in the Pacific Islands. It's going to happen in Central Asia. It's going to happen in Ukraine. It's going to happen in Moldova. It's going to happen largely, let's call it the developing world. I believe that, and I think that's largely true. So, and most of this competition, if you buy what I'm selling, most of this competition is not going to be a military competition. I am all for a 500-ship Navy. I'm for peace through strength. I'm for a strong intelligence function. But most of this is going to be a non-military competition. If that's the case, then we need a strategy for the non-military elements of our power. That's the bumper sticker of the book. So go out and buy the book. Thank you, Will. Yes, everyone go out and buy the book. So let me start. So that's the bumper sticker. But let me tell you a little bit about me, how did I get here? And then I'll kind of go into some of the concepts of the book, and then I'm happy to have a conversation with all of you. Okay, so I grew up in New York. I went to Dartmouth. I learned Spanish in college. It liked me. I liked it. I lived overseas for a while. I did a couple of years on Wall Street. It was a really useful experience, but I didn't necessarily love it. I did a couple of years at grad school at the Kennedy School. I know it's a competitor of you guys, but I had a great experience there. I met my later wife, so I got my love life figured out at Harvard. And then I got my professional life figured out at Harvard. I did a big research project at Harvard for Andrew Natsios, who became the head of USAID. He's now at Texas A&M in College Station. And so when he became head of USAID in the Bush administration, I joined him at AID in 2002, and so I lived overseas in Argentina for a while. My wife's from Argentina, so I worked for Citibank in Argentina, so I had that experience too. So I learned the foreign aid business. I was at USAID, which is the foreign aid arm of the U.S. government. I was there for 5 years. The Bush administration had the largest increases in foreign aid since the Truman administration. It's if you go to the Bush Library in Dallas, you'll see at SMU, you'll see the big part of his legacy, things like PEPFAR, if you know what that is, which was an AIDS initiative. There were a series of other things that he did that are really positive. Major parts of the Bush legacy are in the soft power sphere. Okay, so I learned about that. I then went to the World Bank Group. I was at the World Bank for 4 years, so I had a laissez-passer, which is a fancy term for like an international diplomat passport. I was on the, you hear these rumors like they pay you tax-free. That's kind of sort of true, and it's cushy, it's good, but it was a little too decaf for me. I wanted to work for the American interest, and it was a derivative of the American interest, but it wasn't what really kind of was most inspiring to me. I wanted to be involved in the debate in the United States about kind of how our role in the world. I'm an internationalist. I'm a conservative internationalist, and so basically, I took a 50% pay cut to come to this think tank because I wanted to work on these issues. And so, what's happened in my 20 years in Washington is, and what's prompted me, like, why did I write this book? I wrote this book because China, with its sidekick Russia, and sort of the Star Wars bar of other bad guys, have the ability to fill voids that we leave. So what do I mean by that? So, and I write about this in the book. So let's just use COVID. Everybody remembers COVID. That was not so great, not so fun, right? So 25 years ago, if we'd had a pandemic, we'd have been the only game in town. We'd have said, hey, Guatemala, you need to wait a while because you got to take care of, Pittsburgh first before we kind of get to Guatemala. So you need to wait, for a little bit. It'll be about 9 months, but you guys wait for that. It'll be okay, right? So China had something called, who's heard of Sinovac? You guys heard of Sinovac? Sputnik, you heard of Sputnik? Right, well, okay, so they're repressive regimes. They can hold back. They went to their countries and they said, we're gonna hold back on vaccinating people in Russia and China, and we're gonna export and get a public diplomacy bonanza, right? This is gonna be awesome. So El Salvador, for example, switched its recognition from Taiwan to mainland China about 4 years ago. Guatemala still recognizes Taiwan. So we said to Guatemala, hey, I'm sorry, man, can you wait 9 months? It's gonna be a while. We got this public health book here and you're just not at the top of the list and you're just gonna have to wait. It's just gonna take a while. Well, next door in El Salvador, they're getting the crap Sinovac vaccine. So if you got zero vaccine or crap vaccine, you tell me you want the crap vaccine. So guess what? The Chinese government had vaccine campaigns right on the border with Guatemala. So it was in the Guatemalan press every day. If we only recognize mainland China, we'll get the crap vaccine because the people in the United States are like, hey, just wait a year while people are dying, right? How have you felt about that? So, that's not an answer. I think we've got a problem if that's a real example of the kinds of things they do. Who's heard of Huawei? Everyone heard of Huawei? Yeah. So 25 years ago, we just said, hey, we were the United States and the West were we helped create, connect much of the developing world to the internet. We did that kind of in the 80s and the early 90s. There was something called the Leland Initiative at USAID, which was named after a former Congressman, Mickey Leland. He may have been from Texas, who died in a plane crash. And there was sort of this initiative on technology and connecting the developing world, mainly Africa. And then through institutions like the IFC and OPIC and a bunch of other kind of funny named institutions, we helped finance something called the cell phone revolution, right? You've been to many developing countries. There was this leapfrogging of all the cell phones. A lot of that was, we helped kind of set the rules of the game and finance a lot of that. Well, today, because of COVID, we've had this digital transformation. We've had an acceleration. So if you sat in your basement and you ordered stuff online or you downloaded a video or you had streaming, guess what? That's happened all over the rest of the world too. So the digital divide's going to get closed in rural Maryland. It's going to get closed in Malaysia. It's going to get closed in Mali, and it's going to get closed in Moldova. So either Huawei, the unholy trinity of Huawei, ZTE, and Alipay is going to do it, or some consortium of somebody else. Now, I would prefer the consortium of somebody else, but we have to get our collective act together to have the consortium of somebody else. That means like a lot of intentionality. That's like the Swedes and the Finns and the Koreans and the United States and a whole bunch of funny named groups like DFC and institutions that are called ECAs, export credit agencies, and aid agencies, and MDBs, multilateral development bank. Like, we're gonna have to get our act together. We're not gonna want the digital rails of the future controlled by Huawei, ZTE, and Alipay. Like, that's like a whole bunch of bad things will happen. All the data is gonna get vacuumed up and sent to Beijing. 100% that's what's gonna happen. But they have a price and quality and technology interesting solution that we're going to have to kind of answer the mail on. So, who's heard of rare earths? Rare earths? Okay. Who's worried about climate change? Worried about climate change? Okay, so if you're worried about climate change, you better love mining. You gotta love mining to the tips of your toes. We gotta be like mining like outside here in the parking lot. Like we're gonna have to quadruple or quintuple the amount of mining we're gonna have to do, because decarbonization, if it's gonna happen, doesn't mean dematerialization. So what percentage of the rare earths processed in the world are controlled by China? 40, 50%, okay? So that's like saying we're gonna switch Iran, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia. We're gonna switch dependence on those folks to dependence on China for the carbon transition. Like, that's totally unacceptable. They're also vacuuming up there's like a whole bunch of mines, and like there's something called the lithium triangle, right? You've heard of this? So like they want to like, so if you're concerned about the carbon transition, like I think the United States and others are not going to be prepared to kind of turn over like their dependence on just Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Venezuela to the Chinese Communist Party. Like, I don't see it. So we're going to have to figure that one out. And we're going to also have to get a whole bunch of minerals. So minerals is going to be the new oil, and processing of minerals is the new oil. So we're going to have to, if you're concerned about climate change and you're not losing sleep about mining and processing of minerals, like, it's not a thing. And so you need to think about what that means. And so they've got the lock on that too. So my point is like in the last 15 years, we've had a series of things, whether it's vaccines or the digital divide or mining and minerals, whether it's control of UN agencies. The other thing is they've gone out and said they've got really capable folks who speak English, speak French, gotten degrees in places like the LBJ school, are very capable folks, and are now putting forward really competent people to run for very real jobs in the multilateral system. Now, 25 years ago, like, I'm a Republican, right? So a lot of Republicans are like, this UN stuff, they're just gonna grab our guns, or they're mean to Israel, or there's some hot button social issues. That's kind of one feeling. There's like one poll is that poll. Then there's another poll, it's like, I don't want to get some permission slip from, I don't know, some developing country to tell me what I can do with my national security and like get in the way of my sovereignty. So that's another poll. And then there's a third poll, like, this stuff's all useless. So like, let's just get out of there, right? So this isn't 1995 anymore. My message is this isn't 1995 anymore on a whole bunch of spheres, including the multilateral sphere. So if we say, oh, we're gonna quit, we're gonna stop paying our dues, or we're gonna get out, or we're gonna quit, guess what? They'll fill the void. So the first example of this, and I talk about it in my book, so who's heard of the FAO? So I don't know exactly what the FAO does, but it's like the Food and Agriculture Organization. But I think what they do is they're like a standard setter of like what counts as an apple, what counts as a potato. They got a book that says, in this book, this is what a potato is, and we're gonna mark it down. And we got this as an apple. So if you're in global trade, like when you trade in apples, we say, well, we'll look at the book, the FAO book, and that'll be what counts as an apple. So it matters in things like, okay, phytosanitary stuff, the big words like that. Like, you need things like who sets the standard. So multilateral institutions do several really important things. They're global standard setters. They have gobs of money, and they set rules of the road on different things. So what's happened is, over time in the last 15 years, is they've started saying, okay, well, we're gonna put in, so all of a sudden somebody wins, like, so it's this woman from Hong Kong with it. Well, it's Hong Kong, it's not really mainland China. So the woman came in, the first thing she did is he kicked the Taiwanese out of the WHO. Then they had something called the ICAO. Like, don't ask me exactly what it stands for, but it's like the rule setter for like civil aviation, like who's got what flight over it. Like this area in the sky, that's Taiwan. This area in the sky is mainland China. So the first thing happened when they took over the ICAO, they kicked Taiwan out of it. The next thing they do is they do things like, well, we've got some misrepresentation here. I think I'm going to hire a whole bunch of. I've got these really qualified people. I think I'm going to start hiring them. And you get sort of a large number of folks from a particular country get hired. Next thing you know, and they say, well, I'd really like to hire from my computer provider. I'm going to hire peoplesliberationarmy.com to do all the tech stuff here, right? So you get the idea, right? Now, if they want to run the International Tiddlywinks Association, like I'm fine with that. But if you say to me they want them to run in the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, or Secretary General of the commanding heights of the multilateral system, hell no. So we didn't kind of think about this until this. So why did I mention the FAO? So I go back to like the Trump administration, right? So you can imagine the Trump administration had one of those three reactions I was talking about. Like it's worthless, they're going to be mean to Israel, grab our guns, or they're going to ask for, I have to get a permission slip to protect myself, right? So we have one of those three actions in the Republican Party. Well, we didn't bring our A game to an election of the FAO. The Chinese put forward a super qualified candidate. They may or may not have followed the Marquis of Queensberry rules of elections. Maybe they bribed people. Maybe they didn't. And then we brought our like D game to this. And we said, well, we've got a great candidate from the Republic of Georgia. The Chinese candidate got 120 votes and our candidate got 12. That was the first time that had ever happened to us. This happened 5 years ago. So the most interesting article I've read on foreign policy, like on the kind of great power competition, is the article in foreignpolicy.com on the FAO election. So you should go out and take a look. I'd say this is one of the most interesting articles I've read in the last, in the last 10 years, is about the election of the Chinese candidate, the FAO. You should go out and read it. It was sobering, and it was a useful experience. It was a sobering experience for the Trump administration, who had one of those three reactions I talked about. So someone came to me, I was I knew from politics, and said, Runde, I need a favor. I need your help with WIPO. I'm a pretty well-read person, but if you'd asked me 5 years ago, what the hell was WIPO? Who knows what WIPO is here? Okay, well, you're like, okay, anyone else? Okay, so you're the only guy. Okay, so A+ for that guy. But I would just say that, okay, what the hell is WIPO? So if Will and I invent a new bottle cap, okay? So let's go 1990. Will and I would have put together a blueprint of the bottle cap. We would have sent it in the mail, the blueprint, to the Patent and Trade Office in Crystal City in Arlington, Virginia. Someone would have opened the envelope. They'd have gone to a filing cabinet, looked in the filing cabinet of blueprints to see if this bottle cap was original. And they'd say, yeah, we think it's kind of original, but let's send it in the mail to the Major League Baseball Commission of Intellectual Property at the World Intellectual Property Organization, so that they would send it in the mail to the World Intellectual Property Organization, Geneva. Someone else would open up the envelope, they'd go to a filing cabinet, and they'd go rifle through the blueprints and see if someone in Denmark had invented the same thing to make sure it wasn't a replicated or cheated thing, that this was an original bottle cap. Well, fast forward by 30 years. It's now a CAD drawing or a PDF. It's in the email and it's in the cloud, right? Okay. So think about the implications of this. So they said, we're going to put forward, China said, we got a really great candidate to run the World Intellectual Property Organization. What percentage of the American economy is intellectual property? It's something like 40%. So if you're an advanced economy, a lot of your economy is like innovation-led economic growth, and it's like blueprints and CADs and all that stuff. All the stuff that's Austin's built on, it's built on that stuff, right? So they had a super duper qualified candidate. That person had been like grown up had been like at WIPO for a while, spoke French, spoke English, probably gone to the LBJ school, right? Like qualified person. So they just had their teeth kicked in, the Trump administration. So no more stuff about like grabbing guns or permission slips and national security, or they're not paying their parking tickets. There was no more talk like that. It's like, we need to win this. Because think about what happens if the Chinese Communist Party candidate wins the election. So they would say, I think I'm going to hire Huawei to connect all the patent and trade offices with a cable. I'll hire PLA.com to do the cloud computing, right? So you can get the idea pretty fast of what the stakes were. So I went online and says, they're like a WIPO for dummies. There was no WIPO for dummies. So I had a young person like one of the folks here. I passed pizzas under the door to that person, and she and I worked on it for a week to put together the WIPO for dummies. Who are the candidates? How do you vote? What the heck are the stakes? Explain in Earth people talk what the heck this thing was, because I didn't know what it was. None of you guys knew what it was, but it's pretty darn important. Guess what? There's 200 of these things, some of which are not useless, but if they want to win they want to run the international backgammon organization, that's fine. But running this, maybe not so much. So we have to up our game in a whole series of non-military spheres. So my point is, at the same time, do we have a problem with the people of China? No. Do we have a problem at some level with the people of Russia? No. Do we need to find ways to engage with the people of China, Russia? Yes, I think we do. And I think we should be looking towards a day, and I may be crazy, where we can imagine a world where Russia is at peace with its neighbors and is a multi-party democracy. Now, most people in Washington say, Runde, you're an idiot. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Everyone knows that's never going to happen. Same with mainland China. I want to believe that there's going to be a day where mainland China is at peace with its neighbors, has a peaceful rise. We can get along with them. Now, I don't want them to be the number one economy in the world. I want them running the world. I want us to run the world. I want us to lead the world. I want us to be a standard maker, not a standard taker. And I want us to lead. The current arrangement, however imperfect, if you are worried about global corruption, if you're worried about religious freedom, if you're worried about people getting in your business and like your most intimate and personal decisions in your life, if you're worried about climate, if you're worried about pollution, then you should want the current arrangement to more or less remain the way it is. Maybe with some fixes you could make it, but I haven't met anybody yet in the West who has said to me, you know what, I am super cool with having the Chinese Communist Party lead the world. That would be awesome. Sign me up for that. So I have not had anybody, the most isolationist person in Washington, say to me, I'm cool with ceding the leadership in the multilateral system to the Chinese Communists. So all the internationalist decisions of the Trump administration, I worked a lot with them. Reauthorization of the U.S. Exim Bank. They called for getting rid of the Exim Bank in 2017. They reauthorized it in 2019. They called for the dissolution of the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. They put it on steroids in 2019. They put forward a fabulous candidate to run the World Bank. They did a great job on this WIPO thing. They started thinking about mining. They were the first person to say we need to think about mining. The Biden administration's followed along on that. They've said we need to do something about this tech stuff. Every internationalist decision of the Trump administration was based on a fear of China, us ceding space to China. So we're not going to want, if you let, in all these different spheres, if you add it all up, the sum total is that the Chinese Communist Party will lead the world if we cede these spaces. We're not going to want that. You're not going to want that. And so my argument is that we need a strategy, a Republican and Democrat strategy. We need to have a bipartisan consensus similar to at the beginning of the Cold War. I'm not necessarily saying we're in a Cold War. I hope we're not in a Cold War. But I'll stick with great power competition. I go back to my question to you guys. If you believe we're in a period of great power competition, it's going to play out in all these spheres. So I would prefer that we have a strategy. I haven't talked about allies or friends. America's superpower is that we have friends and we have allies. So we can't do anything we've done of any consequence in the last 100 years has been done in partnership with our friends and allies. We can't do any of this without our friends and allies. We have to be a better friend. We're sometimes a not so great friend. We're sometimes an unreliable friend. We need to be a more reliable friend and a better friend. So let me spend 2 minutes talking about Ukraine because I see somebody with the Ukraine sign on them. We're running a big. So my view on Ukraine is we should send them all the weapons they need. We should send it to them now. It's in our interest to see Russia be strategically defeated in Ukraine. We should want a weak Russia is a weak China. A weak China is less likely to do Taiwan. So the other thing is, what does success look like? 20 years from today, what we want is a Ukraine that is as rich as Poland. It's 1/4 as rich as Poland. It's the same size as Poland. It's 1/4 as rich. And it should be as rich as Poland, have the manufacturing might of Germany, the tech sector of Estonia, the agricultural productivity of Canada, the defense industrial base of Israel, so no one messes with it ever again. We want the Russians to be like, this was such a horrible experience, I'm not doing it for 100 years. That's what happened in Finland. They did Finland, they had their teeth punched in. You haven't heard the Russians say, man, I'm ready to do Finland again. Have you heard? They don't do that. So we want is for them to say, like, I had such a bad experience in Ukraine, I ain't doing that for 100 years. I want Ukraine to be a member of the European Union. I've been running a big commission on Ukraine reconstruction. My deepest thought is everything has to be aligned with EU accession. So our friends in Europe, like the part of their burden sharing is to start negotiations now. A lot of people have concerns about the quality of governance in Ukraine. That's a legitimate concern. We need to deal with the governance problems as part of the EU accession. So who's a member of a fraternity or sorority? Who in undergrad? Who was a member of a fraternity? Okay. So what would you do? What hazing would you do to join the coolest fraternity or sorority at a college? You have to think about it like that. Like, this is the coolest fraternity or sorority in the world is joining the EU. So it's a form of hazing. So it's like hard things, like whatever you do in these, so all the asks that the Ukrainians will be asked, think of it like joining like the coolest fraternity or sorority. That's what this is. So we want to fix the governance issues. The way to do it is the vector is this EU accession stuff. And I want Ukraine ultimately to be a member of NATO. And if they're not going to be a member of NATO, then guess what? We're getting married to them, and our relationship with them is going to be like our relationship with Israel. We don't have a treaty relationship with them, but we got married to Israel. Like we're either getting married to them like Israel, or they're a member of NATO. That's it. So, anyways, my final point is that look, I'm optimistic. I'd rather be us than them, but we have to kind of get our act together. We need to have a bipartisan consensus. I think there's a bipartisan consensus in Washington that we have a challenge with China, the Chinese Communist Party, and with Vladimir Putin, but we don't fully have a consensus yet on what to do about it. So my book is my contribution to kind of like begin a conversation to think about what we could do about it. If you believe that this is mainly going to play out in the non-military sphere, my book talks about what we can be doing in the non-military spheres. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Horns of a Dilemma, and please don't forget to visit our website at tnsr.org.